new Patreon member since we were here a week and a half ago.
Yeah, we actually do have another one. We have a doctoral level Patreon member, Akiko. So welcome,
Yes.
Akiko. Thank you so much for your patronage. We
Yes.
really appreciate it, and we need it. Thank you.
Totally. And at the same time Akiko joined, they bought a challenge coin. So I got to put that in their swag pack at the end of January. I also have a shout out. I have a new friend, mom friend from my daughter's school that I haven't even met in person yet. And we were texting today, and Alyssa, she and her husband are like, we both subscribe to your YouTube channel. So
Oh,
thanks,
cool.
guys. Yes, yes. I don't think we have any other housekeeping. You guys, that'll be at the top of the episodes because we want to get our guest in here. So, information about the watch party coming up, all of that. We'll put that in detail in the next episode, as well as you probably had it on the last one. We hope everyone enjoyed part one of Sovereign Citizens, by the way. Been getting fantastic feedback about
Yeah.
that. So I'm glad we finally did it and put the work in. All right. Well, with that, I am going to let Frank in the room here as I talk all about him. So, Frank Girardot is an American author, journalist, victim advocate, and radio host. He is the former editor and columnist for the San Gabriel Valley News Group. Frank got his start in journalism. Listen to this, as a copy boy at the Los Angeles Herald Examiner. Like, for our listeners, the same Examiner that opened its doors to the LA Times when the bombing happened. I mean, Frank wasn't there back then, but and where freaking Aggie Underwood worked. Like, come on, it's just legendary. So, subsequent to that newspaper's closing, he worked for the Ontario Daily Report, the San Gabriel Valley Tribune, SGV, and the Pasadena Star News. His 1994 story on the unsolved murder of Geneva Hilliker Elroy, the mother, of course, of novelist James Elroy, resulted in Elroy's book, My Dark Places. We're talking some real Los Angeles true crime legacy here. Frank has won several writing awards, including the Southern California Press Association's Award for Investigative Journalism in 1995, the Los Angeles Press Club's First Place Award for Sports Writing in 1998, and he was a finalist for the 2015 University of Florida Award for Investigative Data Journalism. Frank is co-author with Burl Barer of A Taste for Murder, Betrayal in Blue, which was fantastic. I read that when it came out, and that was done alongside Ken Urell. And our longtime listeners will also remember Burned, the biography of serial arsonist John Orr. Frank, of course, co-wrote Burned with Orr's daughter, Lori Orr Kovac. And Frank has appeared on several true crime stories and shows on various cable networks, including Investigation Discovery and Fox News, Dateline NBC. His expertise includes murder investigations, serial arson, the LA County Sheriff's Department, Richard Ramirez case, Clark Rockefeller, John Leonard Orr, of course, and 20th century Los Angeles area true crime. We're thrilled to have the author of the new book, Becoming Clark Rockefeller, Murder, Love, Deception, and the con man behind it all, Frank Girardot Jr. Hi, Frank.
Hey, hi. Wow. I hope you're
Woo!
not.
I got through it.
Wow. That's a lot.
Well,
It's embarrassing.
no, it's fun.
That's what we intended. Like, let's get him
Yeah,
on,
of
and
course,
then we're going
right?
to talk about him for 3 minutes and see if he can stand it.
I know, it's so good to see you again. How have you been?
It's great to see you too. Great.
Good.
And I mean, I see you on TikTok and, other places,
Yes.
but yeah, doing something live is really fun. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. So we met, as we put things in perspective, always pre-COVID at Pasadena Lit Fest, when you were so gracious to invite these podcasters to this panel. And that was a wonderful time, but feels like 10 years ago, not
I
5 years ago.
Yeah.
That COVID thing really like stretched out the distance between before and after. And
Totally agree.
yeah, and it just seems like, that well, I mean, it doesn't only seem like we are in a completely different world in so many ways. And, just in that same time span, all this technology like Zoom became ubiquitous, right? So
Totally.
made us able to do this, have some fun.
Oh yeah, it made Scott and I not have to record after working a 10-hour day in an office building downtown together. We can actually like do it in our pajamas on a Saturday morning.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's the best.
It really is. Well, good. Good to hear you've been doing well. And it sounds like you probably used the time during COVID wisely since you put out a new book.
Yeah, it's kind of a remake of an old book, but it was COVID that got me interested in redoing it. I saw it was there and it was out of print, and I tracked down the publisher, and the publisher said, "Hey, yeah, I've been looking for you. I owe you some royalties." And I said, "I'll tell you
Nice.
what, you hold the royalties and give me all the rights back to the book." So we traded. And the royalties weren't a lot. So I didn't know it wasn't like huge. And yeah, so then I had like during COVID, I had it and I read all these screenwriting books and I knew it had to be, redone in a more effective way. And then like just I don't know, maybe about a year ago, I heard about Taylor Swift buying back all of her music and how
Yeah,
she like re-recorded it. And I thought, okay, Taylor's version, Frank's version. Here we go.
why
So
not?
yeah. So that's how we got here.
Very cool.
Thank you. I was like, Taylor Swift, that took me into a different direction. I was like, she's such a good businesswoman. So we should all
Yeah.
be inspired, right?
Right.
But Frank, welcome back. And again, you pick such diverse true crime stories. So over your career and as you pursue this, which ones continue to speak to you? And also, how did you find out about this case with Clark Rockefeller, this character, and what drew you to his story particularly?
Wow, that's a great thing. So I guess in general, I think what resonates to me in cases are victim stories, really. And I know that doesn't really come across a lot in the book writing because you have to tell this bigger piece. But I'm always just kind of fascinated by how small victims really are,
Mm.
in the grand scheme of things. And in this particular case, we have a really small victim. I mean, it's like practically somebody that nobody cared about. Way back in 1994, a guy was put in a pool in San Marino, and yeah, right there. And as he was digging in the backyard, he came. The pool guys had a backhoe and they discovered some bones. And initially, they thought it might have been a horse or a cow or a dog. And, San Marino had been there for a long time, and it had been farms and orchards and a lot of other things. So they played around with the bones a little bit. They realized it was a human skull.
Hmm.
And and then this whole story unfolds about this couple that disappeared and gosh, what happened to him? And I was just lucky that at that particular time, I was like a night cops reporter at the Star News. And one afternoon, I came into work and, hey, go down to San Marino and check out this found some bones. And yeah, so it kind of stuck with me because there's a lot of intervening time. And then, like all of us that were on the copy in 94, we paid real close attention to this for about a week. Bones, San Marino, rich people, missing couple, guy that people remembered who may or may not have been a suspect. And then, within 3 weeks, OJ happened.
Yep.
And it's like
Oh,
memory erasure. Everything's
right.
boom. What happened? Nothing. I mean, like literally just forgotten. All of us that covered it, went on the OJ thing.
Hmm.
But I had something kind of, I guess, cool or serendipitous. I was really close with the coroner's office, and at I would say like in July of 94, they let me come in and do what would be a tour, right? So I'm doing a tour and we're down in the basement where they had a guy that was a tool marks expert, and he had the skeleton kind of laid out from John Solis. But he also had Nicole Brown's sternum.
Wow.
So I kind of like focused on that because it
Mhm.
had, we were talking about tool marks, and I wrote this story about how, tool mark experts would play a role in it.
Mm.
And yeah, so I feel like I have this like weird connection to it. I was, I had covered these two kind of stories that got buried, literally the victims buried and the stories kind of buried by
Right.
the OJ case.
Well, and I grew up in San Gabriel Valley. So your books always that cover this area to me, like I just love them because just like Burned, right? You start your book in San Marino. And so, a lot of stories about this character kind of start linearly with his life, right? But you start in San Marino when they find these bones, but you really kind of pull back the curtain on San Marino, which is such a delight to read because it's one of those neighborhoods that you could just drive around all day long and look at houses and be like, this is my dream. There's my dream house. There's my dream house. There's my dream house. And if listeners recall in the original movie, Father of the Bride, this is where they live. Right. So, and you even have a quote from Father of the Bride. You have quotes at the beginning of all of your chapters. And you have the quote where Steve Martin's talking about the neighborhood of San Marino. It's just like so picturesque. Oh, I forgot. I got married in San Marino at what was the Ritz-Carlton back then. So
Okay.
like this is to me, I was like, oh my God, give me everything. Give me all the dirt about this city. And so you choose to start the story there and really talk about who these victims were. And like you said, pretty unremarkable folks in a sense, but terribly interesting and quirky and had their own little lives as well. I mean, tell me about like, I know you're a victim advocate and you speak from there, but I love how you highlight and start this whole wild story with just this really small piece.
It's such a it's a crazy story, and San Marino is you're right. It's so fascinating. By the way, I got engaged at what was the Ritz Carlton. So there we have
Okay.
that
All
connection.
right.
And it's so fun. You're right. It's fun. It's a town that's fun to drive around and look at all these houses. And it's
Stunning.
also a place that's easy to get lost. Like, you
Mm-hmm.
make a wrong turn and north is not north anymore. And yeah, and this couple, they got married and they moved into the husband's childhood home with the mother-in-law, his mom, and she had a boarder living there, which is so like not what you think about San Marino.
No.
You think that everybody's wealthy and that the kids grow up and they have generational wealth and they buy their own home, but this was not the case here.
Like
In
there's no
fact,
way a grifter could work their way in, essentially.
yeah. I mean, these are like people that it's very tight knit, and yeah, it's also though a place that if you have that as your zip code or your address, where you can, be fantastic, and a grifter, might say, yeah, I'm the prince of Saudi Arabia, or I'm, of royal blood, and and
Mm-hmm.
the proof is I live in San Marino,
Yeah.
and
And
so
especially at that time, I mean, I think, that speaks
yes.
to a particular time where you could create an identity or get lost or disappear or reemerge much easier than you could today. It's just a lot harder. I don't know if an elderly woman living on her own in San Marino even today would have the wherewithal to go and look somebody up, but you would hope that people would do a background check before they let somebody live in their home.
You would hope, but I mean, I think one absolutely, doctor. That today would be totally different. You just couldn't do it. There's too many Google. You can Google search somebody and their
Mm.
stories, and you can find out they're full of it, or you can find them on Facebook. The mom wasn't really that elderly though. I mean, she was late 50s, early 60s,
Oh,
but she was, a heavy drinker, a heavy smoker. She was, kind of super depressed about how her life was going and was going to turn out. And she needed income from this back house that was on her property.
okay.
So, she rents it to this guy who identifies himself as Chris Chichester, the 13th Baronet of Chichester, somehow related to Sir Francis Chichester, the famous guy, the single-handed sailor who, circumnavigated the globe in basically a sunfish type of sailboat. And people were bowled over by that. It's an unusual enough identity that, with a business card, and in fact, he had one that had his name and
Of
title on
course.
it.
Of course.
You could kind of buy your way into a lot of stuff. And because he said he was royalty, a lot of the dads wanted their daughters to date him because this is kind of
Ugh.
a way, like, there's the whole Rose Queen thing that San Marino's
Yes.
associated, but why not be a real princess or right, or
See,
real royalty?
that's
Whoa.
like okay, like I know I gave you a 3-minute intro already, but I have to say, like, what I love about your writing is that the true crime buff's brain enough that we love to go down these little rabbit holes, and your writing does that. You go down the rabbit hole of talking about what it's like to be one of the women who's in the running to be a Rose Queen, at the Rose Parade, that lived in San Marino that never got it. And you go down, you follow all of these just enough to like satisfy and then like come back to the narrative, which is lovely. And one of my favorites, again, another weird connection here, is you talk about Dr. Judy Suchy, who was a forensic anthropologist that gets called out. So when I was at Cal State Fullerton, I took her class. And she also recruited a bunch of us criminal justice students to actually go out to the desert in Palm Springs to go hunt for a head that she was looking for. So one in first part of the year, they had located a headless body out there. They thought was some sort of, mob hit sort of thing, but they never found the head. So she said, I know all the criminal justice students will be into this. Come out to the desert in the 100-degree heat. Let's go find this head now that the rains have come through because maybe it's washed up. So we went out there for several hours and we never found a head. And we were very disappointed.
Field
But
trip.
I know.
Did it ever turn up? Like,
I don't know. I just did like an introductory class with her and I thought she was amazing and, read all about her legacy in all of the counties here in Southern California because everyone used her with such amazing expertise that she had. But, because she was so embedded in the anthropology department and I was in criminal justice and psychology, our paths never really crossed anymore. But when I saw her name in your book, I was like, what? This is so wild. But it's pretty neat. I mean, those are the little adjacent pieces that you can get more of through your storytelling that just brings San Marino to life and what life is like in Southern California, and then particularly mid 80s and then mid 90s, of course, when we fast forward.
So, wow, you're awesome. Thank you.
Well, that leads me to a question about Clark for you, Frank. Is it possible that he purposely came here to avoid, like, it's easier to create an identity about royalty on the West Coast than it would be on the East Coast, where it seems like the rich are more dense. I mean, more densely populated, not dense intellectually, but densely populated, where word would travel really quickly. And you can get lost in Southern California very quickly. You can go from neighborhood to neighborhood that each has its own sort of own unique hierarchy and social climbing status.
So that's a great question. He's an immigrant who came from Germany and spent most of his youth studying America and Americans. And when he got to the United States, he lived with a family in in Connecticut.
And that was the writer's family, right?
Yeah, that was the writer's family. And he watched a lot of Gilligan's Island and fixated on Thurston Howell
Thurston to do that mid-Atlantic.
Oh.
Jane, I'm not going to answer that question. Jane, you have to Aaron, I'm not going to talk to you. I have watched his interviews with Aaron over and over again. And he's
Moriarty.
Wearing his prison clothes, and it's like he's a prince. He just has this air of narcissistic entitlement that is baffling.
It's wild. And he must have had it, obviously, but I think he developed a way to, train others to serve his need for adulation, right?
Yeah.
Because the writer's family threw him out and he followed a path, right? He's a high school student, then he attended college for a while, married for a green card, and ends up in California. And, for a time he was in South Pasadena. and then, found his way to San Marino. And I assume that when you get to South Pasadena, you hear like, hey, you want to be in San Marino because that's
Yeah.
where the money is.
Right.
And right. And so he ends up there, figures that, okay, now the way he does his thing is really interesting. He gets into the church. And in San Marino, the Episcopal Church, the Church of Our Savior,
Right.
was like very, very influential for a lot of reasons. One, because, George Patton had grown up in that church, and his grandfather, Benito Wilson, was kind of the founder of LA. So, people who live in San Marino, they see this church as being sort of like the pinnacle of display of your success. So he joins this church, gets in with some of the families there, and then they introduce him to a woman who needs a renter. And
Mm-hmm.
and
There's his
and
in.
yeah, it's just it's boom, boom, boom. He figures it out, and then he's already developed the identity of Chris Chichester. Now he's got the address, and it's just a matter of how far he can take the con. And what is the con? I mean, I think for him, the con is like, a free meal, pretend, hanging around with people at the USC Film School and, I think, trying to figure out how to like maybe fit in and actually cash in on his royalty. So, he hosted, in the 80s, remember they had cable TV where you could like, you could go down to the studio and you could do whatever you wanted for an hour. And
Oh yeah, public access,
yeah,
right?
public access. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he had a public access show, and they would interview, he and his co-host would interview like, local politicians and prominent people. And, everybody thought, well, this guy, he's such a young go-getter. He's so
Mm-hmm.
with it.
Well, it's so interesting that I had no. Well, now I'm fascinated. I need to go find and see if anybody has posted those, if there's any tapes left from that time. But when you talk about him mooching off the writer's family and then finally getting kicked out of there, I remember in one of the articles I read that they just got sick of him because he was completely mooching. He was laying on the couch all day. He wasn't doing anything. And it seems to me like I wonder if this was sort of the beginning of his learning. Like, oh, I can't get away with this. I'm going to have to continue to layer things onto my grift. Like, I'm going to have to get the business card. I'm going to have to convince people to give me some kind of job in order for him to continue on his path, right? He couldn't just sit around and do nothing.
Yeah, I think there's like a school for grifters somewhere where like,
Mm-hmm.
like they either know each other or they, back then they traded, they had I mean, because the amount of information and the stuff that they could do, or the stuff that he could do is just really, how do you come up with this? Like
Yeah.
it's not like something you can come up with just off of like the business card thing, unless you're just like either you're twisted or you have somebody like guiding you. I don't know how it happened in
A
the case.
grifting mentor.
Yeah. Well, he may have.
Mm.
But so I mean, like so back to the Ed Savio family in Connecticut. What got him kicked out was it's a cold winter day, and he's sitting there on the couch watching Gilligan's Island, and the daughter of the family comes home, and he won't let her in the house. He makes her stand on the porch for until their mom gets home 2 or 3 hours later. And she got there and she's like, no, you're not going to treat my daughter like that. You're
Mm.
gone. So yeah, so he goes on his pathway. Now he's a German guy. That was in Berlin, Connecticut. So he goes to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which is at that time had the highest concentration of Germans in the
Yeah.
United States. And then, gets married there in an arranged marriage. He dates a woman, finds out she has a twin, tells her he wants to marry her twin, and they fix this whole thing up. So he gets his green card and heads out to California. And all the while, I guess, yeah, figuring stuff out. And in California, in LA, I know he meets other people because there's later on in the story, you find out there's a family that's taking care of the mom, Dee Dee Solis, after her son and daughter-in-law disappeared. And he introduced them to her. And when she died and had, a bit of an estate left, they split the estate with him. So there's some sort of, I just figure there must be like, a clown college, there must be a grifter college, right?
Well, and, Scott and I have covered, I don't know how many different con people, but, when we look at the research for con artists, it comes up with what they call the dark triad, the narcissism, the psychopathy, and the Machiavellianism. And it seems to be that deadly, and in this case, really deadly combination that drives them. And it's interesting because there's kind of these theories, and I want to ask you if you think this was true at all about him, that he did come to California because he was kind of enamored by the entertainment business in Hollywood and maybe would give that a shot. But it also sounds like, there's some of this lore around him, like really being into Alfred Hitchcock films and kind of obsessed with like The Perfect Murder. To me, that sounds like a little bit of, let's lend some more creative liberty to his story rather than maybe he just got in a pickle with this con and had to kill this couple. But I want to know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I think I think you're right. He probably did come to LA, I think some part to get involved with the film industry or be close to the film industry. And he does have this obsession with film noir. And some of the tropes that you see in film noir do involve murder.
Mm-hmm.
And how, getting away with it is not easy and most often not done. And I think too, he somehow got involved with a student film project at USC where they actually, the whole thing revolved around a dead body in the morgue. And so there, he had this kind of weird fascination with death. However, I think you're right. I think that, it's more like life imitating art than the other way around, right? Like somehow this couple, he kills the couple, and certainly the man, right? Because his body is buried in the backyard.
Right.
And now he has this, kind of a film noir conundrum, right? He's got a dead body, maybe there's a living girlfriend, and he's got to stay one step ahead of any investigation that's gonna come out of this.
Mm-hmm.
So I know people that think he's absolutely evil enough to have, wanted to commit a murder, but I think it's more along the lines of what you think, that it's just like something that happened.
Yeah.
But
what do you think?
I don't know.
What do you think, Scott?
I'm with my weird 80 brain. I make connections that aren't necessarily connected. So like Shiloh was saying, I don't know if they've just overplayed the Hitchcock component, but one of Hitchcock's really seminal movies is Rope, about two young men that are convinced that they can commit, because they are rich and they are smart and they're entitled, they can commit the perfect crime. And I mean, what's interesting is they don't get away with it. The investigator is able to sweat them out. But, in everything that I read to prepare for this, Frank, I did not know that bit. I mean, I knew about him laying on the couch and being demanding and like wanted to be waited on and wanted them to bring him his breakfast in bed and stuff like that. But that purposely not answering the door is very interesting to me from a diagnostic standpoint. It's like he's testing the waters. How much can I get away with? And it's almost like he's saying, okay, this is going to be my little experiment. And maybe I'm ready to move on from this location. But this is going to be my experiment. How much can I get away with before my host push me out? And clearly that was the one, right? But to leave somebody out it's California winter, so it's not that bad.
No, this was in Connecticut.
This was back east.
Connecticut.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah.
That's bad.
Yeah. I mean, the mom was like really ticked. And, I never really made that connection, but I mean, that's
who knows, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Because John and Linda could have been the perfect victims that he sized up right away. or it could have been total circumstance, right? It's his way to get into San Marino in this living situation. And who knows, it could have been totally impulsive, like a fight with them, or they were about to find out all of his bullshit and tell
Right.
everyone, and he had to
Probably.
do that. But I think it could easily go either way.
And it
I
could be
don't
a
know.
combination of that too, right?
Totally,
Like,
totally.
like
Yeah.
they want to move into the back house. They get into a fight with him, and they're like, "Hey, listen, we know that you're full of shit, and here's A, B, C, D reasons why."
Yeah.
And then it just, he snaps. He's like, "Oh my God, I'm going to lose all this stuff I built up,"
Mm-hmm.
and something happens, right?
Yeah.
It's the thing that we don't know, and I think the thing that might help us figure out why is we don't know what happened to Linda. You know,
Ugh, tragic.
and that, like, she's the missing piece, right? Was she there when her husband was killed? Did she is there a love triangle? Was she a participant?
Right.
I mean, there's all these things that could have happened that nobody knows what actually did happen. And then there's after John disappears and Linda disappears. Within a week of their disappearance, Linda is allegedly seen with Chris in a pickup truck
Hmm.
in Redlands.
Hmm.
A
And
week after?
yeah, within days.
Okay.
So could be as much as a week. But she's not, and the description is the man who saw them knows Chris. He sees a big redheaded woman in a pickup truck with Chris, and she's crying. That's his story. So, did it happen? So they don't find a body for like 9 years. So every witness is pretty much, unreliable at that
Right.
point. And which is why the forensic information in the case is kind of important and valuable. But she's gone. She's gone. Nobody knows what happened. Her body's never been found. The detectives believe that, she was killed probably, within hours of her husband, that, there's a possibility that she's also buried in the backyard, and that, maybe in the shallow end of the pool where they didn't, dig as deep as they did in the other end of the pool. That's one, possibility. She could be, out in the forest. She could be on the road between, here and Connecticut, because the next time that Chris turns up after he leaves San Marino is he's living in the back house of a place in Greenwich, Connecticut, and he's driving John Solis's pickup truck.
Boom. So that's how many years later is that?
Let's see. So it's at least maybe 3.5 years later.
Okay.
Yeah.
So John and Linda are missing. Clark, whatever we're going to call him,
Yeah.
just for the sake of this,
We can call him
hour-long
Clark.
story.
Yeah.
He ends up going back east, and then, kind of laying low for a while, ends up marrying Sandra Boss,
Right.
right? Right around the same time that the body ends up being found, correct?
Yes.
About 10,
Yeah.
9, 10 years later.
Yeah.
So tell us how, like, what his next phase of criminality is here.
Yeah. So this is a really interesting phase of criminality. I love that word. That's a great
Yeah.
word. I'm going to add that to my book. So he goes to Connecticut. He lives in a back house, and he actually takes a job as a day trader, trading stocks and bonds. First in Greenwich,
with no experience at all, like
Of
kind of
course he
talked
does.
his way into it.
zero.
Great.
In the first place he worked, he told the people that own the place that he was a computer expert, and they needed, so this is beginning of networking computers, late 80s. And so they hire him to network their computers, and pretty soon he's trading stocks. He gets fired because he doesn't want his boss looking at his computer. Instead of getting fired and, oh my God, I'm just going to go back and live in the back house, he gets a job at Kidder Peabody in New York as an actual trader. And on his job application, he used the social security number of the son of Sam, David Berkowitz, as, there's my social security number.
Wow.
And they don't check it or anything. And so he's working at this place, and in this particular section of the business, they have a very strong connection with Japan. And they have a woman working there who's a Japanese, Japanese woman who's a translator for the brokerage. And he becomes enamored with her and eventually, moves in with her and decides that he's going to sell that pickup truck. So he goes to sell the pickup truck. And, because it belongs to a missing person, it triggers a hit on CLETS or, one of the law enforcement databases. And in San Marino, they call Greenwich, Connecticut, and they say, hey, listen, we want to talk to who's ever driving that car because we've got this missing couple and, it would help us tie up some loose ends. So Greenwich police go to, they figure out where he works, they figure out where he lives, where he works, and they go to his place of business. He's not there. The boss says, well, he might be at his girlfriend's house. And they call the girlfriend. And when he's in the room with the girlfriend, he tells her, don't say anything. Don't tell him I'm here. And they knock on the door too. And, she tells him they're not there. And he says, gosh, thanks a lot. There's people chasing me and they want to kill me. And I need you to help me get away. And in fact, if you could help me, it'd be great. But why don't we go up to Maine? We can get married. And, you can be Mrs. Chris Crow and, we'll live happily ever after. So they go to Maine and they go to this place in Maine. I don't know what it's called, but apparently it's famous for lobster. And he orders this like really nice, they have a nice restaurant there. So he wants to, go have dinner and celebrate the pending engagement with his fiance, and they won't let him in. So he goes back to his room and he tells his fiance, I'm going to try something. And so he calls down to the restaurant and he says, hey, I'd really like to get a reservation. And they said, well, who is this? And he said, well, my name is Clark Rockefeller. And they said, Mr. Rockefeller, we've got a table for you. Please come down right away.
Just like that, it worked.
Yeah, it worked perfectly. And he had the girlfriend get him an American Express card that said Clark Rockefeller on it. So now he's got an identity, a name. He's the cops have again forgotten about the missing couple in the truck and everything. And, this is early 90s, 1991, and he's, living free and easy in New York, no longer trading stocks because when the police were looking for him, he didn't show up to work. And so they fired him.
Lovely.
And at some point in that little phase there, he actually flew back to California, met with the couple that had been caretaking Dee Dee Solis and split the proceeds of her estate with them.
Whoa.
Before
That's ballsy.
Was anything ever done to them, or were they ever identified?
Oh yeah, they were identified. Don and Linda Weatherby. They lived in a trailer in La Puente. And
wow.
And
I mean, no shame to people who live in trailers, but that's a big leap from, the San Marino population, right?
Yeah. And in fact, it's where Dee Dee ended up. She ended up in a trailer right next to theirs when she died.
Jeez.
And so he comes back and splits the proceeds and kind of like slips into his persona as Clark Rockefeller. And, he and his girlfriend, they don't get married, but they stay together. And, he's kind of the people, like I talked to a lot of people in Manhattan who knew him. And, he was kind of a bon vivant, right? He was always seen walking as a Gordon Setter. He always had an opinion on the stock market and on world events. And he would get invited to like really cool parties. And he had this fantastic collection of modern art, Pollocks and Mother's Wells and Rothkos and, like stuff. And people that would go visit him during this phase of his life, they'd go to his pad, and he didn't have any of the art hanging. It'd be like rolled up.
Just leaning against the wall.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a Rothko.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think that's my Rothko right there.
Right.
Yeah. And
he was just loving being a Rockefeller.
He just like stepped right into the role. Here's an interesting thing. So the gallery that he was dealing with was the Knoedler Gallery, and that was in Midtown.
Yes.
And the Knoedler Gallery is involved in one of the the largest fraudulent fake art
The
scams.
forgeries, right?
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, the forgeries. So, he might have been
Hmm.
part of that deal. I don't know if we know. There was a woman named Glaphyria Rosales who was part of that, and she was dealing art with him or selling him art. So,
So
but
when
he could
he
have been
meets
scammed by it too.
True,
Yeah.
true. So when he meets Sandra, she's not the one that he was with in Maine, right? He meets her in New York.
He meets her in New York.
Okay.
He meets her at a party, at a Clue party.
Oh, that sounds fun.
And yeah, it does. And everybody comes to the Clue party as a character from the movie. So I think she came as Miss Scarlet, and if I remember right, he came as, I want to say he came as Mr. Green, but that doesn't seem like he probably would be Mr. Green. But
Professor
yeah,
Plum,
maybe
perhaps,
Professor Plum. Yeah, I
with
think
the
that's right.
glasses.
I
I'm
think
just
that's
thinking.
right. Yeah, I think it probably was Professor Plum. So, they hit it off because they're Clue nerds.
Mm.
And one thing leads to another, and they get married. And she's an interesting woman. She's a graduate of Stanford. She had masters from Yale and a McKinsey, McKinsey. I mean, she's freaking consultant with McKinsey in Boston. So, with a salary of well over $1 million a year.
Mhm.
So, I mean, he's kind of struck pay dirt here. He's got, this, great woman who wants to, have his name, and he can have all of her money. And believe me, he spends it like she's making 10 million a year.
Wow.
Yeah. Which, so, so we get to this point where, they have their relationship is they're married, and she's now, of course, think about this, McKinsey consultant with the name Rockefeller.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like marrying two, kids from different countries that are royalty and perfect.
Yeah.
And he's probably thinking, all I got to do is knock her up and let us have a kid together. Then we're tied together forever.
Which happened.
Yeah, but the thing that I can't get past, and this is one of the things that came up in is how different people viewed him. And there were the ones that, initially met him that he was able to continue this grift with, and they all fell for it. But there are a number of people that from the beginning is like, this guy's creepy.
Mm.
So it's just amazing to me that the women, even in his interviews, he really is. It's comical how entitled he comes off, but he's a creepy guy with he looks like Wally Cox, like a well-dressed Wally Cox. If anybody remembers
That's a
that actor
great
from
that
from the
what
80s and
yeah.
70s.
He's Wally Cox with the manner of Thurston Howell.
Yes,
Mm.
exactly.
Yeah.
By the way, do we know how big he was? How did he manage to kill somebody, blunt force, dig that deep of a hole? And then social, she was
She's
a
a big
very
woman.
large woman. She was like
Yeah.
6'2" or 6'3".
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's
Was
not a big guy. I mean, he's 5'5", 5'6", maybe.
Hmm.
And slight build, not super muscular. The forensic evidence indicates that he's used a blunt object to strike John in the back of the
from the
head.
back. Okay.
Yeah. So, and John
Gotcha.
wasn't a big guy either. So, leverage wise and I mean, it just would be right hit, right place, right time, type of thing. I always thought, by the way, that his build and John's build were very similar, and the whole thing with the will. I always had this idea, it's a crazy idea, but what if, right? Like you're able to assume all these identities, right? What if you killed somebody who kind of looked like you, who would have an entitlement on a property,
Sure.
and when his mom died or somebody died, you could just slip into his identity and be
Like he was
him.
trying to do a talented Mr. Ripley in a way.
Yeah,
Mhm.
like that kind of a thing. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, I mean, that's occurred to me. There's so many funny that you mentioned the Talon Mr. Ripley, because that is one of those movies that kind of fits into this story, right? And there's another one too, an Orson Welles film called The Third Man, which is also that sort of, you know, film noir, late 40s. It's about a German guy that, is hiding his identity in Connecticut because he's a war criminal. and he kills somebody who knows who he is. And there's, this whole, mystery and drama around that. So yeah, that's one of the things that, about this story that I thought, made it compelling. Just all the like the film noir kind of like
Yeah,
hits.
he could have plucked inspiration from a little bit of all of those.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So how long is he with Sandra? And then they have a daughter. I mean, before she's finally sick of his crap.
Yeah, I think he's with her like, probably I, I can't remember when the daughter was born, but probably like they're together 5 or 6 years, and then the
Mhm.
daughter's born, and they're together another, 5 or 6 years after that. But in the early 2000s, she's like questioning a lot of stuff with him. He uses her money to buy a house in New Hampshire in the same little town where J.D. Salinger lived, called Cornish, New Hampshire. And, and the people there, of course, this is a small town, but it's an artsy community. And so they question him, and the way he ingratiates himself with them is this incredibly grandiose gesture. They have this old church that's fallen into disrepair, and they can either the city is thinking about like the future of this church, and one of the pathways that could happen to it is that a developer is going to buy it, and it's going to be no more. So he comes in with $1 million and says, "I will buy the church and sell it back to the town for $1."
What a hero.
Yeah,
Aw.
he's such a hero. But he's
Yeah.
using Sandy's money,
With somebody
and
else's money. Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah,
of course.
and she gets suspicious. He's not nice to her. He's really not a nice husband at all. He's, not only does he practically hold his wife hostage, he, ignores her while and prevents her from getting involved in the education and growth of their daughter.
Mm.
So she's like, she's had enough. She's decided she wants to get a divorce, and hires a private detective. And the private detective, they have the, how this works is, there's all these databases that you can search for identity. And so they open up, the identity database, and it's like, well, we don't have any record of this guy prior to 1995.
Right.
And so
Not a good sign.
not a really great sign at all. And it sets her on a pathway to like, start Googling some of the stories that he told, because now Google's around, and
Right.
the marriage falls apart, and they divorce. And the settlement is she has sole custody of the child, and he gets $350,000 in gold Cougarans and Eagles.
Okay.
Yeah. So he really
It's
loved
like
his
Scrooge
daughter.
McDuck.
Yeah.
That gif of Scrooge McDuck swimming in the gold coins, right?
Sorry, I'm laughing on that. But yeah, basically. And but like all divorce settlements, dad's got to see the child. And so, they make arrangements for supervised visitation. Sandy moves to England, but comes back in 2008 for a visitation. And in the interim, he plans a kidnapping. And during the visitation, he kidnaps the daughter, and has convinced his friends to drive him from Boston. They're right on right there. The kidnapping happened right there in the Commons.
Wow.
If the Commons are right there in the heart of Boston.
Yeah.
And he convinces a friend to take him from one part of Boston to another.
Accomplice. Yeah.
And then another friend to drive them from Boston to New York. And in New York City, she drops him off like outside of Penn Station. And they take a train down to Baltimore, where he becomes his, final identity, which is Chip Smith. And he's used the gold coins to buy, a pad in Baltimore and a kind of a crappy catamaran. And his plan is to like, hold the daughter there and then escape in the catamaran down to Chile. But the thing is, it's like, if you're a Rockefeller and you kidnap your daughter,
Yeah.
y-
The hunt is on pretty quick.
yeah, Amber Alert.
Yeah, slightly,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Elevated.
yeah,
Whatever the rich person version of Amber Alert is.
yeah.
Yeah,
It's Gold
yeah.
Alert.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. God, that this is almost the most mind-boggling part of it. Like, what was his long game here? You would think that someone with these qualities that we're talking about doesn't want to have a kid around them, or really, it's just a total power move to screw over the ex-wife, really,
right.
more than anything. But what was his long game with that?
Don't you think though he might have been grooming her, like in some way, or,
Who knows?
like, yeah, I mean, but yeah, what's the, but end of the day, what is the long game,
Yeah,
right?
what's the
I
benefit
mean,
to him?
and how do you get away? Like, yeah, and how do you run when you got a kid? Like it gets easy for you, one guy, to like, drive a stolen car across the country, but
Yeah.
it's something else entirely to, take a
Well,
kid with you.
when we have this conversation about the long game, it reminds me of the more recent experience or media presentation of another narcissist, Anna Delvey, in the East Coast as Anna, and another one that developed a weird accent and
And
Yeah.
glasses, big
and
And
glasses.
glasses,
the
yeah.
big glasses, yeah.
But like at any point, I mean, that's what is interesting about the level of narcissism that was both the superpower and the kryptonite for both of these individuals. Is there is no long game, right? Like you just keep thinking that things are going to be able to be the way they are, and yet also not be able to be okay with what you've accomplished with that much child support and payment as he was getting from his ex-wife. He could have created any kind of great grift with that kind
Yeah.
of financial backing.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
again, it's one of those things where we're trying to get into the alien mind of somebody that's just not wired the way we are.
Right.
His motivations, he could have been grooming her, but it would that brought up an interesting question for me, is like, do we really see much of kind of any sexual expression for him? Like that hasn't been the big driver as far as I'm aware of, except for these sporadic relationships.
There's a little bit of that. I
Okay.
mean, there's stuff that happens in San Marino where, there's some sex stuff going on. I mean, there's
Okay.
part of his, like, as part of his in fact, he's probably bisexual, and I think uses that as part of, I mean, he cons a judge in San Marino to give him a chainsaw at some point, around the time of the murders. And, another time he was, seen cavorting with, other men in the backyard of a house. I mean, I'm using word language from, the era and the folks that witnessed it. But, there was a lot of questions about when he was in San Marino about, well, in the 80s, is he gay or is he straight?
Okay.
And then, and I think his relationship with at least his wife, the subservient stuff, was unusual.
Yeah. So some coercive control, but also like maybe even using sexuality as a weapon to kind of be a chameleon and perhaps blackmail people with it, and crossing those boundaries.
Yeah.
Well, and in representing the gays, I'm just going to say we don't want him. So we will not claim him. We want nothing to do with him.
Yeah. Well, I mean, chameleon, I think, is a great word. Like I think that really describes it. I think like if he's in a conversation with a group of people, he becomes something that group of people, either wants to gravitate toward, or that will let themselves be manipulated by it.
Yeah.
And I think that the chameleon is really the best description.
So he gets caught, obviously, because of this high profile kidnapping, and ends up indeed getting prosecuted and convicted for John's murder.
Yes.
Linda's body's never found.
Yes.
And he sticks to the story that she probably killed him and went on the run, right? That's
well, I mean,
he says I think he says that she's still alive. He was in that interview with Erin Moriarty. He's like, "Oh, I'm convinced that she's still alive, and she's changed one letter of her name."
That actually. So, can I tell you something about that Erin Moriarty interview? So I actually did that interview while 60 Minutes filmed it, and if you notice, she's never at that table there.
Stop it.
I swear to God, go back and watch. He wanted to talk to me, and they convinced the judge to let them in and set up the cameras. And the entire interview, I did the interview with them. And that thing about her and the letter name change and going to South Carolina and all that was part of one of 5 interviews that I did with them.
You're blowing me away right now.
Oh, wow. So they were just splicing
Interesting.
all of that varied. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And I
The
let them,
magic of editing.
yeah,
Right.
and I didn't, and I was too like, I mean, I wasn't like really smart enough to know what was really happening. I was like focused on, I got to get this story.
Yeah.
This guy's been sentenced. I'm going to sit here. They want to set up lights and mic stuff up. I'm okay with it. So,
Lesson
yeah.
learned.
Yeah, right.
Interesting.
Yeah, totally lesson learned. And Erin Moriarty is great. She's like, she's a great reporter, and she's, I think, shown that time and time again. But in that particular instance, that was me.
Got
Yeah.
it. Got
No,
it.
that's really good to
Give
know.
credit where it's due.
And I agree. I mean, I actually like her style. I like her compassion for victims. And she also is not afraid to pick up cases and report on them that other people might feel like, I'm not going to touch that one because it's too controversial.
She's really great at that. But that at the end of that case was the end of that trial was really fascinating because the judge, he wanted to talk to the media, and Dateline had done a story, and they had Mark Seal, I think, as the writer whose book they were promoting, and 60 Minutes wanted to do a story, and they had Walter Kern, whose book they were promoting. So they had, all this competing stuff that was happening, trying to get in and talk, and who's going to be on, and when they're going to, have the show. I can't remember which one now had the jurors, but I mean, man, I learned a lot about the TV news.
I bet.
Yeah.
And then he gets in front of, the media and basically says nothing, just talks in circles.
Well,
like,
that's a crazy thing is like, even after like 5 or 6 interviews with the guy, that was his whole deal, right? Was talking. So I was down in the Men's Central talking to him, and I snuck a little pencil in and I'm taking notes, and he can see I'm really interested, and he's start telling me about like, hey, all you got to do is you got to get to Cornish and find that, go to the house where I used to live, and in the basement I've got a whole collection of Buicks, like from 1940 something to 19, and like I'm writing all this down, I'm thinking, oh, the guy's got a collection, and then I realized like, oh, this is another
he's sending you on a goose chase.
Yeah. Like Matchbox cars.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Oh my gosh. Well, he's doing life at, I guess they're moving everyone out of San Quentin, right?
Yes. And actually he's eligible for parole in, I think, 3 years.
Oh, that's right. 27 years is what he got.
Yeah.
Wow. I literally, we barely scratched the surface, but I mean, that's a good thing because you guys need to pick up this book and read it because it's fantastic, as we've already raved about it. And I'll put links in the show notes when we have this up, but it's Becoming Clark Rockefeller: Murder, Love, Deception, and the Con Man Behind It All. Frank, where can people find you? Your books, where can they find you? You have any appearances coming up?
I'm got some scheduled, but they're not calendared yet, so I don't know the dates.
Okay.
But you can find me on Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, all with my name. I just started a Substack, and it's called Area 51 True Crime Substack.
Cool.
So
yeah, we've been getting that.
All right,
email.
Good.
Yeah. I'm so sorry. I didn't even know you had your thing you were doing at Vroman's. I would have loved to stop by this week. Scott and I could have popped by after work, but I found out afterwards.
The next one, when I have a date, I'll shoot you the date well in advance so that you guys we can catch up, and maybe we'll have a little chat afterwards.
Or I think you should just throw a clue party, and Scott and I would be happy to be there.
Okay, done.
Yes, please. Scott's going to be Mrs. White.
Flames. Flames. I hated her so much.
Thank you so much for your time, Frank. It's so good to chat with you.
It's so great to chat with you. And thanks for having me on. I really appreciate you guys. And I love everything that you do, all of your various media. So
thank you.
keeping me entertained.
This is great. And it won't be another like 5 years before we have you on again. We got to get you
figure
in on
something
something
out.
else. Yes.
Cool. All right, good. Well, okay, we'll talk soon.
Okay, take care.
Okay,
Bye, everyone. Have a good night.
Bye, everybody.
We sincerely thank you for spending some time with us today. LA Not So Confidential is part of the Crawlspace Media Network in partnership with Glassbox Media. Each episode is hosted, produced, and written by Dr. Scott and Dr. Shiloh. Our post-production editing and sweetening magic is handled by the multi-talented Jason Usry of Ear Cult Productions.
The LA Not So Confidential theme entitled Cool Vibes Film Noir is composed and performed by the talented Kevin MacLeod. He graciously allows us to use his music via a Creative Commons Attribution license, and you can check out all of Kevin's amazing work on YouTube.
All of the resources for each episode can be found on our website at la-not-so-confidential.com. You can find us on Instagram at LA Not So Podcast, on Twitter at LA Not So Pod, and on Facebook at LA Not So Confidential. Media inquiries and bookings are scheduled at alienistentertainment@gmail.com.
Please join us each month on Saturdays at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time for a live streaming and very interactive broadcast on YouTube entitled Behind the Couch. Stay tuned to all of our social media for our live streaming scheduling announcements.
Subscribe to LA Not So Confidential so you never miss a new episode. And lastly, we'd be honored if you joined our Patreon at patreon.com/LA Not So Podcast. With a subscription, you get an ad-free listening experience, and you'll be the first notified about upcoming live events, social gatherings, and super cool swag coming your way.
Thanks for listening, and join in with us next time on LA
Not So
Confidential. Bye, folks.